Uh, Tom, the first question I have for you this week: what did you
Yeah.
build with Lovable, and what the hell is Lovable?
Oh, lovable dev. I spent a couple of hours trying to rebuild a application that we hired a developer for multiple years, and hundreds of hours of real dev time went into this product called X-ray.tools. It's an automation search engine. If you're non-technical, just pop in the tools that you use every day and it tells you what you can do on Zapier, Make, Workato, Bardeen, N8N, and Microsoft Power Automate. Right? We indexed all these automation providers to tell you what the triggers, actions, and searches are across these automation providers for whatever tool you're using. And I wanted to rebuild it in Lovable to see how quickly I could really rebuild something that I had a really specific example for. Right, the automation search engine is super clear. The hard part is actually in the data architecture and like getting the data. So Lovable is only doing a front end sort of remake of what I made in, or what our developer made in X-Ray Tools. So Lovable is basically a prompt based developer. It writes code for you based off of a chat conversation that you have. So if you understand code and you can say, make the margin here bigger, or make the what, like if you can use technical terms, you'll really be able to harness the power of it, which I was able to do. And in like 3 hours or so, um, basically rebuild an entire front end of X-Ray Tools that included confetti. That's the most important part of this story. It included confetti, and it was just like, wow, I didn't realize how easy it would be to create a front end with just text based prompting. Is it something that we're going to roll out and deploy in production? Probably not. I think that's a really interesting conversation because you're rolling something out in production that was prompt based coding. So I really want to hear that side of things. But like Lovable was just really a prototyping and experimenting platform for me to just what could it do? Could I actually rebuild a front end on this tool that took a developer a couple hundred hours to build? The answer was a pretty resounding yes.
It's wild. Yeah, I had much the same feeling this past weekend when I was like, I want to try building something with these, which we should chat about in a second, like this new layer of how to approach internal tooling and what you can build that isn't maybe no code, low code, and isn't full blown software development. There's this new kind of middle layer that is here already and rising quickly. But point being, we are hiring a bunch right now, and we collect as a way to not have resumes going into 10 different places to track down. All of our application links funnel back to using a fill out form, fillout.com form. And so that's working really well. But with 200-300 applications, opening every resume and clicking on every link and parsing it and having a place to put notes about them, this is why ATSs, applicant tracking systems, were invented. But I don't know about you. I like in my career, having been at different places, have used a bunch of the off-the-shelf ones, and it's just like they seem so overpriced for they're essentially
Yeah.
collecting resumes or rendering them, etc. So there's a lot more that they can do. But as a classic ATS, I was like, I just want to try building something, and all of this started with, long story short, in fill out, there's the upload of resumes in PDFs and Word
Yeah.
formats.
You get
And
the
so
data
all these
output.
uploads, yeah, exactly. And so all these outputs or resumes to review open up in this tiny little preview box that isn't big enough to read. So you have to download it to your computer and then open the file
Oh,
and then read it. And it's like, sure, that takes 10 seconds, but you're doing that for 200 resumes. And that sucks to have to do. So all of
yeah.
this was born out of all I wanted to use Replit AI for was just a way to add in all the resumes securely, kind of like in our little tool, and have it render the PDF or Word doc live. So I gave it that as a starting point, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go back and forth with this thing for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then maybe it'll be buggy, and 20 minutes later, we'll get something working. First prompt, 5 minutes later, it was working. It was like, oh, okay. I used Replit about 5 or 6 months ago, and it was buggy, and I was having challenges. But what
Wow.
I thought would take nearly an hour to kind of build and troubleshoot and have it working would ultimately save time, but it would be a chore to get there. So it was a very, very small use case. My intention was not even to build a full applicant tracking system. But because that was so easy, I was like, okay, well, I can add to this. So back to the ChatGPT style prompt window. Hey, can we add in a rating system? So then, as I'm working through the resumes, I can just, leave my thoughts and notes. Took 3 minutes to do that. Okay, can we add a filtering system so that I can filter all the tags I'm
Mhm.
doing? Okay, can we actually add a list view on the left-hand side where all the resumes are there and it has my filtering and tagging on it? And then the right-hand side is like a view of that individual candidate. That took another 10 minutes. Next thing I know, I am just like adding feature after feature that normally you would picture a product or software development team building a backlog
Put it on the
for. And
roadmap.
over the course of, yeah, exactly. Put it on the roadmap. 3 weeks later, you can test it. Then you'll get feedback, and then we'll fix some bugs, and then we'll deploy it in the app, and it might break, or people don't use it. Whereas this was like in 5 to 15 minute increments. I was adding features that, having worked, and you too, like having worked
Yeah.
with product teams, like this would have been a month for each feature, not because it actually takes it long to develop, but well, someone's got to go design it, and then someone's got to approve it, and then someone's got to write the specs, and then you got to build the user story and create a ticket, and developer has to, anyways, you get it. And so after about 4 or 5 hours, I had not only, what I originally set out to do was an easy way to view and manage the candidates. I then had it build, a connection with Fillout, so it pulls in any new candidates that apply. I
Sick.
asked it with literally a one-line prompt of, I want to run AI analysis on this using my OpenAI API key, and have it render in each candidate view and save it there when you run the
Yeah.
AI analysis. It was like, yeah, okay, great. 10 minutes later, that's probably the one that took the longest because it's having to set up all this infrastructure of like,
Yeah,
okay,
like, there's a ton
like
of stuff there.
building the routing and like all this stuff. And then, classic user case of, I saw the thing. I was like, oh, actually, I need to be able to edit the prompts for these. So can you build a setting screen where I can edit the prompts for this job role, and I can add in all these different things? And then it did that. And then it was, when you use ChatGPT, you type something and you can see it typing back real time, of course.
Yeah.
This, out of the box, when I asked it to do this, it would wait for ChatGPT or OpenAI to send the entire AI analysis back. So it would send in the prompt and the information, the data points to the API, and then AI's response, it would wait to write out, it's writing a paragraph, 5 or 6 bullet points. So it takes about 15, 20 seconds, which doesn't feel like a long time when you can see it streaming. But if you hit run AI analysis and you're sitting there waiting, you're not sure if it's doing anything. So long story short, I said, I want this to stream real time like ChatGPT does. And I left it vague on purpose. And this is, I know, getting super into the weeds on the technical side, but I
Yeah.
left it vague on purpose because I was curious to see if it would understand what it needed to do. And it did, because for real time streaming, you have to use WebSocket technology, which is
Yeah.
finicky and creates a ton of rendering issues where, as a user, you're having it update real time on your screen while the entire app is kind of running still. So it figured all that out, built in
Wow.
WebSockets. 5 minutes later, I had real time streaming. 10 minutes. And all of this was just like iterative, iterative, iterative. And so finally got to the point where I was like, I'm looking at this product on the Replit screen, and I wish I could show it, but it has all this candidate information, so it wouldn't be appropriate to
Yeah,
share
yeah.
public. But, 10 minutes. But I'm looking at the same, like, this is an app. Like, this is a full blown product now. And I built it piecemeal over the course of a
Yeah.
few hours, and I didn't even mean to. So at the very end of it all, I was like, well, we can manage multiple jobs. So can you create a new jobs page where each of our jobs, we can have it in there. We can add new jobs. We
Yeah.
can connect it to the fill up form. I want a live count of number of candidates in each job on the overall job screen. And also we need authentication and it able to handle multiple users.
Yeah.
Built it all, and I was watching it as it went because my fear was what I've heard from others, and is always a concern with AI is like security and privacy. Of we
Yeah.
built authentication, but it turns out the passwords are all in plain text and anyone can see them. So I watched specifically in the code what it was doing, and it was hashing passwords. It was creating private keys. It created its own internal API that it's passing all this data around, but it's built it in such a way that if we wanted to go a step further, we could plug into this product and have it connect to an
Wow.
Airtable for when, someone, and I'm already visioning this for us, of like when someone moves through the interview flow to, offer acceptance and they become a teammate at Switchboard, we can
Yeah.
click, okay, convert to employee and send it off to Airtable to trigger off, our operational management of employees and whatnot. So that was a bit of a ramble and a bit of a story, but just to like paint a picture of like,
Yeah.
my mind was blown.
What like so a couple of things that happened in Lovable was like it would render something and then it would say I hit an error and then there was a button that was like try to fix it. Like did Replit hit those types of errors or was it just like off the bat, you know,
So
just
when I
perfect?
used it about 6 months ago, it did a lot of that. This time, like you can see what it's doing as it's doing it. It has,
Yeah.
it's not full chain of thought, but it has the little thinking icon, but it's showing you what it's doing. It's like, oh, I'm opening the API or the AI routing file, and you can see
Yeah.
I just
Yeah, you see
deleted
it write
40
it.
lines and added 60 lines, that kind of thing.
Yeah. The
But
diffs are
previously,
pretty
about six
cool.
months ago, it would do, yeah, it is cool to see. But about 6 months ago, it would be very user centric of like, we hit an error, we hit a roadblock, can you help? This time, I had that happen maybe 2 times. It would spot its own error before I did, and it would correct it because you could see its kind of conscious stream of, I'm editing this file and I'm doing this, I'm editing this file. And it would think out loud where it says, like, oh, I
Wow.
realize actually, like a very quick example in the filtering mechanism at the top, I wanted it to update the candidate counter. So when I flip to, one filter to another, it says there's this many candidates in this filtered view and this many in this filtered view.
Mhm.
And when I asked it to do that, it thought for a second, and then its stream of consciousness back was, oh, I realize I've already built an internal API and we've already got the right styling for this in other places. So I'm just going to use those over here and plug it in. And that, I know that's very high level vague, but like that was the kind of thing where I previously had seen it try to build it, get an error, and this time it like thought out loud and avoided the
Yeah.
error because it's thinking about it in the right ways. And then when there was actual errors, because it wasn't perfect every time, there's a few times though where it would push something and say, "Can you test it out now and make sure I got it right and it's working?" And if it didn't work, I would screenshot it. And at first, I was, again, something that's advanced quickly. I was looking at the console logs to see, what were the errors, if it reported any
Yeah.
in the console logs. And it can now read the console logs. And so therefore it writes its own error management code of like,
Mhm.
if this is going to
Lovable did
fail,
that
I should
too.
write an error so then I can understand myself. Like
Yeah.
I'm rambling now because I'm just in genuine shock over this still.
Well, but would you have been able to build that with Replit if you didn't understand how to code?
No. Well,
Why?
I'm self-taught and I've never been, the job title of a software engineer. I've built lots and worked with lots of teams and self-taught over the last, call it, decade. So I understand the software architecture. I can read code. I can write it, but I'm not very good at it.
Yeah.
But
Do you
the
have a GitHub?
architectural side,
Do you, right? Do you have a
yes.
GitHub? Do you have
Yeah.
Visual Studio
Yeah.
Code on your computer or
Yes.
Sublime Text or Cursor? Like, do you have a text editor? Right? Like, is
That is a great
Xcode
bar.
something that you've installed on your Mac? Right? Like,
Yes. Great bar for that question. Yes, to all those things. So yes, like what I'm trying to paint a picture of though, of like, you don't need to be a level 10 Amazon senior software engineer to
no,
use it.
no.
Like you have to have the foundational understanding of, like, I would say a good bar is, if me talking about WebSockets a few minutes ago was totally lost on someone, it's like that, then that's probably a bar of like, if you don't understand that, then you can build stuff. But like
Yeah.
what we built here is we're deploying it internally. Like, it is a deployable thing that we are going to host, and we have multi-user authentication and login set up. Like, it's, point being though, too, 6 months ago, I had nothing but challenges with doing the same kind of thing, not building ATS, but the same level of complexity of building something. Now I had almost none of that. And so AI is essentially abstracting away the knowledge that you have to have. Like, you imagine this 6 months from now, the how much less technical knowledge you'll have to be able to guide it and correct things and
Yeah.
whatnot. So to me, the way it's going to play out is like over the next 6 to 12 months, the level of technical knowledge someone would have to know to build with it is lower. So already people that are hiring firms to build them custom software, those firms should be able to do stuff not at huge scale enterprise level 10,000 are accessing a tool tomorrow, but a 200-300 person company in the next 6 months, like people should be building with this, and 6 months after that, so 12 months from now, of like, as if
Yeah.
you are a person who understands service design and workflow and process design and very fundamental data architecture, that you would be able to start building in this.
I was able to catch up with another friend this week who is pretty prominent in the bubble world and knows some really large bubble agencies, and those agencies are already kind of reporting that like Lovable or Bolt.new or Replit is like stealing deals from them on the agency side. So if you had a 50 or $100,000, product build, MVP build coming in, they're like, actually, we're just going to build an MVP with Lovable. Sorry, right? Or stop the project. I want to go build this on my own with Replit. Like that's a pretty big shakeup, because you would think, the technical people would be safe, but in some regards, it's really, you're not.
I think the bubbles, the retools, the glides, the flutter flows of the world, like that entire segment of how people are building internal tooling is, unless those tools adapt very quickly to what Replit and Lovable are doing, they're not going to exist.
But why wouldn't they, like, why wouldn't they just add in that prompt based auto builder and use all of the components that they already have? Right? Like
Oh no, I agree.
couldn't they?
I hope that they do. I imagine refactoring their products around that way of building, both as an end user and internally, like their code base, I imagine would be not an overnight thing. So I hope that they're working on it, because
Yeah.
that's how they should pursue their market moving forward. But if they don't, I days are numbered with something like a
Yeah.
Lovable or Cursor or Replit. It's wild. it,
It is,
I
man. It is. You make me want to sign up for Replit now and fork over the what did you have to pay for? Because you can't do Replit free. Lovable you could do free. Bolt you could do free, or at least a trial, but you had to fork over some cash for that, right?
mean, yeah, but it's $25 a month. I think it worked out, and I found a discount code online to try it, so I think it worked out to $15 a month for like the Replit agent, and then they have. I won't try to explain it here if folks want to go look at kind of the pricing structure, because it is a bit clunky. Of like, well, if you're using databases, you need to pay for that. If you're using compute, like that kind of thing, or if you're going
Yeah.
over your limit in your $20 a month plan for using the AI agent to help you build stuff, it'll charge for that. So in total, though, on Sunday I had spent $18, and then Joe, my co-founder, like I showed it to her, and she's like, I want to use this, and she had all these ideas, and we were like building, adding on to it. So this week, since Sunday, we are now at $26. It has cost to build out something that we're deploying internally that is not going to have a marketing site tomorrow. It'd be branded as a bamboo or greenhouse or lever competitor. But
Yeah.
that's the whole point of where SaaS is going. Like, well, why are we as businesses and end users funding them and their marketing and their expansion into use cases we'll never need and features we'll never use? Like, why are we funding that when we could just build exactly what we need for $26
Yeah.
and a week of work? Granted, again, this is like, not meant to say this is a tool for a 300 person company to use tomorrow, but with another week or two, it could be. It does bring one other thing I want to chat about, though, to get your take on. It does bring a totally different lens, though, of like deployment and maintaining it. I think a lot of people like no code tools like a Zapier or an Airtable, because with 10 minutes, basic common sense and 10 minutes of education, anyone can fundamentally understand what they're doing in those tools.
Yeah.
Replit AI is, at the end of the day, outputting code. So if you build something with all this, if you deploy it locally and you take all the code out of Replit, and you want to add on to it, or there's maintenance to do later, it is still code at the end of the day. So it's not as easily kind of maintained where an operations person or a head of a department can kind of maintain something. So that's something that I think people should keep in mind too.
That maintenance component is like, oh man, it's just so hard to wrap your head around, because it's like, what does it really mean to maintain software right now? Like, you're not maintaining any Zapier or Make automations really. Like, they're managing all the API connections between all of their integrations, or the company is on their automation platform. So like, you don't have any of that responsibility. In a case where you are outputting code, maybe this is actually a really great agent idea to say, hey, penetration test my internal tooling and,
Yeah.
every day check all of the libraries that I have and all the GitHub repos of the open source things that are being used, and make sure that, create a list of to-dos to upgrade my internal, ATS, or whatever custom, internal tool that you build. um, Maybe that's actually a really great application of an agent, being sandboxed and knowable and have access and whatever. But I keep coming back to the point that it really matters what the skill set of the team is. Like, you have some coding context and understanding, so now that burden of maintenance falls on you. Like, at the very least, you on a monthly basis need to send a prompt into Replit and say, hey, are there any updates? Make the appropriate updates to all the appropriate libraries or dependencies that are being used. Like, now that becomes your monthly task. um and
Well, it became an agent's monthly task that I added in, but yeah.
Oh, you did add an agent into that. Is it also
Well,
through
it's I
Replit?
should not call it an agent. It is an agent would be a glamorous term for what this is. It is its own
Agent's
file.
already a glamorous term.
Yeah, it's already yeah. I just don't want to puff up like everything's an agent now. But anyways,
Yeah.
you're on a good train of thought. I was just saying like you can build that stuff into it quite easily though.
Well, it's something you have to do,
Yes.
right? It's a necessary evil or dependency of this particular approach. Um, if you don't have somebody who is code adjacently literate, then I can't recommend using Lovable or Bolt or Replit if, like, you've never opened up an HTML file. At the very least, like, you have to be adjacently literate to be able to effectively leverage these platforms, and even, like, have the language to ask for what you want. um,
Yeah,
Maybe
that's why I
that
say
problem
like
will be abstracted away, but that's a tall order.
I think it will, but I think the problem or not problem, the need will always remain of like you do have to think about, maintenance, feature expansion, troubleshooting, end user support, like that kind of stuff. Just like any tool though, like it's
Yeah.
really to your point, as long as you've got either someone internally on the team that can handle that stuff or a partner externally that can handle it, like you're fine. Um
Would you roll that ATS out as, like, a offering that clients could pay a subscription fee to you for? Like,
yes,
almost
like
like
in
an
its current state it's
exclusive
not there
SaaS
yet, but
offering?
like yeah, another couple weeks of feature additions and then having like someone on
Multi-tenancy?
our team who is like a proper software engineer go through and spruce it up and make sure my take is all the authentication and privacy and security is there, but obviously when tested. But point being, with another couple weeks of effort, yes, absolutely. And that's the thing too of I think moving away from the SaaS model of like we'll host it and we control everyone's. It's more of we'll build it for you and you get to deploy it, or we can deploy it for you and you host it and we can help do maintenance or feature additions in the future. But I think that's the beauty of it too. Of as long as you build the right infrastructure, the cost should be minimal. Like napkin math for let's say a 50 to 100 person company using this ATS and they're hiring and getting 100 to 500 applicants a month. Quick napkin math with the way this is built, that should cost them about, depending on how many users they have, like $20 to $30 a month. And Bamboo greenhouse type stuff, like that pricing And then amplify this for larger companies, like to scale that up would be
Yeah.
a ton in user seats. Um, Whereas, Greenhouse doesn't even have their pricing on their website anymore, if that's any indication. Neither does Lever and Bamboo HR. I'm Googling as we talk. uh, Also doesn't have the pricing on their site anymore. So I've used some of those and know them to be quite expensive. So point being, you could deploy this for yourself with some modification from, a partner like what you guys do and what we do, and host it for like $25-$30 a month instead of hundreds or thousands a month.
Yeah, I think it opens up an interesting conversation in space around like, you know how you have IT providers where you have like law firms and small businesses that like hire a company dedicated to like managing laptops and making sure that everyone's email is set up and all that stuff. Like, I think there's becoming like a software AI tooling equivalent of that, where it's like not hardware IT, it's like software and systems IT that, would your customers actually want it deployed on their systems, or do they just want someone that they trust to manage the fact that the pipes are always up? Like your Replit ATS, applicant tracking system, does it actually make more sense to clone it for additional clients, or to make it multi-tenancy and whatever updates happen for everybody, and like you add the one layer of like turning features on and off on a per account basis? It seems like there would be demand for probably both, depending on, again, the humans inside the organization and what they want. But I think there's like this interesting space evolving of like managing and being the white glove side of like, how do all these systems work? Like, you're our point of contact for that, rather than fully outsourcing or trying to fully insource everything.
Yeah, it's the same, I think, as any custom software shop has done for years. Of, we're going to build it for you, and what's your plan for hosting? Do you want us to do it, or do you want to do it? I think it's the same thing, just in a new era of, you're going to get your tool way faster, and the hosting or deploying for yourself are both way cheaper by nature of the way that this is built, which is compared
Yeah.
to SaaS, at least. You can go and buying something off the shelf, and you can then run with it and customize it. It's either, it's built as is and you use it as is forever and you're happy with it, or like most things in life, there's a new paradigm, there's a new need, there's a new requirement. We want to add a new feature that we had an idea for, and you can do that. Whereas you go to a SaaS provider nowadays, and because they're trying to cater to everyone, and you say, "Hey, we need this feature." Okay, submit a ticket, and if it's
Good
not on
luck.
a roadmap, good luck. Whereas
Yeah.
you get to control your destiny. So it's, I think, the most fascinating thing, which I'm curious your take on, is like where it sits in this level of how teams run their operations in this AI era of, there's the no code and low code space, like you were talking about, the bubbles of the world. And then there's also Zapier and Make and N8N and all that fun stuff. And then there's full blown, custom software development where engineers are writing code from scratch or boilerplate and building something for you. And now it feels like there's this entire layer in between that, some of the SaaS apps do, like an Airtable does a lot of this, and you can build it with that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, kind of your take on where this stuff sits in. And sorry, one other thing to add is agents and the actual true, like, well, we don't need formal software to do these things. We're building agents for it. So it's like this stack of options of
Yeah.
no code, low code, SaaS off the shelf, custom tool development with AI, custom tool development with software engineers, and full blown like agents that are running free.
So I don't think it's a pyramid or or like a gradient. I don't know if all of those different pieces of technologies or those different tactics actually apply to all problems in the same way. So there are certain problems themselves that are more applicable to agents, that are more applicable to off the shelf SaaS, or internal automations or automations with AI. Like, those are all really distinct approaches that I think have different problem sets. So that's the first thing that I think about when I think about all these different technologies and approaches. The second thing, like, just to the agent point, I think there is a hierarchy of approach with time till value and investment to valuable output. So if you need to set up, if you have a problem that could be solved by agents, that would actually be the best place to start, if like possible, right? Like an agent isn't going to solve your ATS problem. It
Right.
might augment it. It might change what your problem is and shortlist candidates for you. And there's ethical and like there's a whole bunch of obvious concerns about that. But like an agent doesn't actually solve your workflow problem of dealing with applicants, right? Um, on the other side, you have like really gnarly engineering problems that engineers can only address. Could they address it with GitHub's Copilot or with Bolt or Replit as like an augmentation of their skills? Absolutely. But if you need to do something relatively technically complex that it requires your understanding of business systems and technical systems, like the AI is not going to be able to do that. You have to have an engineer who actually can understand and process that, and like maybe be boosted by a GitHub Copilot, but not replaced by a GitHub Copilot. Like there's too much context that needs to be fed into that system to be able to like actually be effective. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Is like there are these different technology tactics that apply to different sets of problems, and like that would be a wonderful piece of content that we should probably make generally, is like some graphic of like different problem sets mapped to different technology approaches, mapped to different skill sets and like job roles inside the company. Like a
Yeah.
senior software engineer, a Replit or a Copilot is way more relevant than a Zapier. Like, just don't give a senior software engineer Zapier. Like, you're just wasting their time. You need to give them the appropriate level of support, and certain segments of these tools actually map much more closely to specific job roles that have skill sets and specific problem sets that have, only one or two ways to like, have a successful output. ATS versus an agent is like a really good example of that.
And I would say the gradient is within those roles. What seniority level is it? Straight up replacing versus augmenting a very senior software developer with a cursor, or
Yeah,
GitHub Copilot is like 10x
yeah,
realistically. Whereas we're already seeing in the job market, whereas a junior software developer can be, it's even awkward to say, like can at this point straight up be replaced by a Replit AI. And there's kind of, and I bring this up because old Zuckerberg last week was just saying like their intention is kind of AI to be at the level of doing the same work that a mid tier kind of middle career, middle experience level software engineer can do. And so to your point, it's working backwards from use cases of
hmm
what is the use case, and then what is the applicable technology? Is it agents? Is it custom tools? Is it Zapier? Um, and it really depends. It's just there's a whole new paradigm here that benefits everyone, I think, other than the software development career path for folks. But
Well, and,
that's a whole
and
other story.
I echo a lot of those sentiments. I do want to like caveat like the junior software developers that went to school, ended up in a bunch of debt, ended up at a big company, might be getting laid off because of AI. It's ironic that they're kind of the first ones in line. Um, I do think there's tremendous opportunity for somebody who understands the technical components of these things to create something new. Like whether they are socially or personally entrepreneurially minded, that is a different story. But I do think that there's a land grab going on right now with AI tooling and AI adjacent tooling that just has an enormous blue ocean right now for every industry and vertical and workflow that people do today. Should be viewed as an opportunity, right? Because you're going to augment and amplify people. So build an AI oriented system that is going to amplify people in an industry you care about, in a workflow that you understand, right? Like these are things that someone who gets laid off from Facebook is more than qualified to create. It's just a matter of like, do they want to? Is there enough, financial wiggle room to take that leap? Um, and what stack are they going to pick? Are they going to build with a Replit? Are they going to build with, a cursor or whatever? Or are they going to just use some open source tech and a couple OpenAI API calls and like, pick the construction industry or, some industry that is like already a little behind that is in a position to really like leapfrog. I think a lot of like the Microsoft access systems and like the just like archaic adoption that happened during the dot-com boom, that is ripe for disruption. How can you position a SaaS offering or an AI augmented offering or an agent, an innovative model, a result based model or something to like create sustainability for yourself and help a huge group of people.
Well, and that's talking about external products. Maybe this is the last point on this, and then we can get to our speed run of news of the week. But
Mm,
um, it also applies just as much to internal teams. So, I mean, we're talking a lot about creating new products, new software out in the world for people to use and buy and whatnot. But I think this drastically affects how internal teams are going to be approaching, call it their AI transformation. If we're out of the digital transformation era and into this AI transformation era, it's, how do we improve our operational efficiencies or bottlenecks or the use cases that are ripe for improvement? How do we take these tools and apply them internally? And that is, again, to your point, I think the same point stands of, someone might have gone to university for 4 years for a software engineering degree, and there might not be as many employment opportunities as a true, call it software engineer, but those skills are incredibly valuable for them to sit inside of a company and say, how does everything currently work, and how do we build better tooling around it? Because the tooling that you can build internally for your team to turn a 30-step 3-hour process into a 10-step 20-minute process is huge and incredibly available to folks internally because of things like Replit AI.
hmm
Building NATS just for yourselves is no longer a 3 software developers for 9 to 12 months. It's one junior person who understands the fundamentals in 6 weeks kind of thing. So
Call me crazy. I think that's a workflow designer or a workflow engineer. Like designing the way that people work is a emerging job role, and somebody with a CS degree is extremely well positioned to be a workflow engineer or a workflow designer. It's a huge job role that everyone's going to have. Just like, there's not a whole lot of companies out there who don't have websites, or haven't engaged with somebody that is a web developer or a web designer. Same things for workflows, and same thing for, how people are going to harness all these technologies. Like it is the job of somebody called a workflow designer or a workflow engineer to design the way that people work. Period. That's the whole thing. That's the whole job.
yeah, I mean, I was trying not to talk our book too much, but agreed for a multitude of reasons.
I mean, I think the language is important. I think it's important to
Yeah.
say, workflow designer and workflow engineer, um, because we get these questions all the time. Like, I was talking with somebody the other day trying to trying to amplify their team for onboarding. You have a technical department. The CTO spent all this time on doing data migrations for new customers, onboarding onto their platform that they've spent the last 20 years building. um, that engineer, that CTO, is not going to want to create new ways to ingest data. They have their way to ingest data, and it's somebody on CS or somebody else, at their client. It's their job to format it the right way so that it can be ingested. Well, that's a ton of work, like just that migration, that component is really, really hard. And when we're talking about like what is taking up time and costing the organization money, do you point the finger at the CTO? Do you point the finger at customer success? Do you point the finger at the client to say like it's your fault that you're not onboarded, in 3 weeks instead of 3 months? Um, Those are really those types of questions have huge implications for the internal systems and the way that people do work, and how successful the company can even be. And you try to help where you can.
Try. Yeah. Cool. Well, that was a deep dive on kind of like our main thing we want to talk about this week. But should we
Yeah,
speed
yeah.
run some of the news that we saw that we found interesting this
Yeah,
week?
there was some crazy news, man. We got to talk about the news.
To the news. So something that stood out to me that I'm curious your take on that we can spend just a couple minutes on. But
Yeah, yeah.
um, Andreessen Horowitz shared a great kind of blog post and sit down interview on YouTube of talking about the RPA, robotic process automation era, is being very quickly degraded, if not wiped out, with the agentic approach. I think about a company like UiPath, which to me has always perplexed me as to why it exists, because it was technology built that in a moment in time felt like it would be useful. But robotic process automation, for anyone who isn't aware, is like literally programming clicks on a virtual computer to run through a process. And so UiPath stock, because AI and agents are coming, AI or UiPath stock in the last year is down 38%. Granted, I think that they're seeing the writing on the wall and they're trying to address it, and their stock is up 16% in the last 6 months, but over the last year, they're down 38% year over year. Point being, we talked about agents last week, and obviously we won't, spend a ton of time hyping them up every week. But this week we saw, Andreessen bring up some great points around like agents are replacing what people thought RPA would be. We saw OpenAI release Operator just yesterday, which is their, essentially automated way of doing what UiPath did. And it's early days, but the biggest news to me of the week was it's a bit of a rebrand of something that somewhat already existed, but they're quickly evolving the product. And I know you're deep in this world. So with Zapier, they kind of formally released agents. And I'm
Yeah.
curious your on that.
Yeah. So, my initial impressions were actually really good of Zapier agents. I think there's some important context to know also about Zapier and OpenAI. Wade, the CEO of Zapier, and Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, they're friends. They met
Yeah,
before. They met at
yeah,
YC and they know each other well. So
yeah,
I think Zapier actually has a really interesting insider play on emerging OpenAI stuff. So the fact that OpenAI announced agents and Zapier has agents presumably leveraging OpenAI directly on the back in the background, um, I don't think is a mistake or a coincidence, right? Like Zapier is very intentionally hitting the least technical market possible. It's why they have enormous adoption. Millions, I think they have 2 million businesses running on Zapier. Like that's a huge number. Um, and so Zapier agents is a super simple way of having a chat based conversation to build an agent that does a thing. But the really huge differentiator for them is that they have the 7,000 existing integrations to use as triggers or actions to incorporate into the agent. So, like, I tried, almost, I tried a bunch of different platforms this past week. I was using Gumloop. I was using Lindy. I was using a couple other ones I don't want to name. But Zapier agents was by far the easiest to get started on. And whether or not we can make something super complex, I don't know. Haven't gotten there yet. But I'm hesitant to say that's even necessary, right? An agent is an agent. Give it an environment, give it a goal, give it some directions and outputs, and like let it go. And within 15 minutes, I was able to do that on Zapier agents. So there needs to be some refinement, but I think it's a sleeper play here. You're going to pay more, obviously, per agent than you would on some other platforms. But do you need that trigger? Do you need that action to put information where you want it? Clearly, Zapier has an advantage there, and I think it's really exciting to see that Zapier's like being aggressive. They're like
Yeah.
actually throwing out new technology that's useful instead of like the half-baked tables or the half-baked central which got cannibalized by agents. These like half-baked mini products were really just a stepping stone for these things like Zapier agents, which I think is a very meaningful product and will probably be their most successful product. I will bet outside of their automation product. I think it's really good.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, to what we were talking about earlier, it's still early days, so it's only going to get better literally every month. That's the thing now of like features like this that are being released within products is not, oh, great, let's see where it's at in the year. It's like literally every month, certainly every quarter, these things are progressing quickly just by nature of what they're using on back end technology wise and progressing. But I think the biggest thing to your point and what we were talking about earlier of like, it really is use case dependent. So Zapier agents in their current state, my hunch is even over the course of this year, are not going to be able to do incredibly complex things. But not every use case needs something incredibly complex. It can
Yeah,
be, a simple, hey, someone submitted a contact form on our website, go out and research them and pull data from these three sources and then add it to this CRM. Like that is something
that's
it can do
helpful.
now. And to your point, it's already got all the integrations with all these different tools built in versus, what I did with Replit, connecting with Fillout.com's API. Sure, it only took 5 minutes, but I had to know what to ask it and validate it and
Yeah,
make sure it's working. Whereas, Zapier has that right out of the box. So for someone with little to no technical skills, they don't have to worry about that. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. Which our last topic of the day is a very quick one that we're both just kind of mind blown by. Speaking of things moving quickly, is OpenAI's announcement of a $500 billion infrastructure investment, which of like, a lot of this was already on its way. Like a lot of these buildings that they're talking about investing $100 billion this year, like the building, they released a video, the building's already built, like they're on their way. So it was a bit of a PR thing,
yeah,
but the $500 million commitment, I think the thing that blows our mind is how indicative this is of like every business. This isn't us talking our book. This isn't us, snake oil and overhyping things. When we say like every business needs to be thinking immediately about how they transform for AI era, because it's not coming, it's not pipe dream, like it is here already. And there's $500 billion, not half a billion, $500 billion just for OpenAI over the next few years, on top of 10 other news items we could talk about infrastructure investments, but this is the big
yeah.
one.
It's a big one because I think it lays the groundwork for so much more investment by other players. There was a lot of conversation around OpenAI just killing all of the agent startups, right? All these millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that VCs funded, various agent startups, and just the new feature released kills all of those startups. Maybe kind of, I don't buy it, but like the infrastructure side is what enables scale and sustainability. I would imagine that they're based in Texas, right? Like these have to be solar oriented buildings to be able to hit the energy demand. Or I mean, what I didn't see
This
how they're going to fuel it.
Yeah, this infrastructure investment is across nuclear is a big one, existing power grid, upgrading that. Solar is a part of it, but it's not a fundamental part of it. It is, unfortunately, I think some more kind of fossil fuel driven stuff.
Seriously,
But
they're going to
my
spend that much money and throw oil and coal at it?
Well, they're because the data centers need very consistent, very high amounts of energy, it's more likely that they will build new forms of energy for the data centers and take the energy from the existing grid, and we use more of that as kind of people in their homes and whatnot. Like the all the new
Yeah.
stuff is gonna go to this. So it's wild. Every week is something new, but I think that's probably a good place to end it for this week. Tom, anything else on your mind before we go?
Oh man, I don't think so. I always appreciate the chat, Justin. Oh shoot, yeah, we both got to get back to work. So, all right, I'll talk to you next week.
Chat next week. Later.
Thanks.